So my artistic background is I've been studying here at Saatchi for the last 2 years, and prior to that I began studying art here in Florence about 20 years ago, and I never left. So I'm interested in how the systems that we've created to make sense of the world shape what we see. And in this work in particular, I'm working with the grid as an ordering principle. And you could say it's a visualization of our faith in rational thought and industrial progress. So in this case, I'm particularly working with painting, the medium of painting, which I have engaged because of its entanglement with the grid, particularly in terms of the perspectival grid, which is of course what we use to translate a three-dimensional world onto a flat surface. It's also in the warp and weave of the canvas itself. And it's in the history of the modernist grid. So if we think about the idea that the modernist grid is a symbol of art's autonomy, turning its back on nature, and I'm questioning that idea. The starting point was the phrase by Donna Haraway, which is that we have thrown the Cartesian grid over the world. And we're trying to map and measure every inch of the world and chart every phenomenon we aim to control, like the coronavirus. And so I'm questioning that principle and questioning that way of thinking about the world, that perhaps that has also created some of the problems that we're encountering, some of the collapse. So in a sense, the work is about a collapse of those systems, and it maybe reflects that, but at the same time, the work is called undoing. So the idea is that we could also change and we could redo and rethink the systems that we use to organize the world. So in terms of the paintings, the strategy is to not only not use a perspectival centered, let's say, approach, because I'm also questioning this idea of man as the measure of all things, so the sort of human-centered perspective. And so rather than a predetermined perspective-centered painting, I am taking the grid itself and, let's say, troubling the lines of modernism and modernity. And I'm using the interaction of color, and I'm using also composition and line that evoke natural systems, self-organizing systems. And then just to say about the title of the show, it's called And the Grid's Heart Fluttered. And that comes from an article in the International Herald Tribune in 2003 that described a really vast blackout in North America that was due to the collapse of the power grid, which of course happened recently in Texas. And it described how the grid's heart fluttered. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to think about, a kind of anthropomorphizing of the grid and making it human, having a heart. And that in fact that's what's needed, right, in terms of repatterning and rethinking. But I've also done a series of drawings, lines of thinking, where I'm responding to contemporary art discourses that describe a questioning of an undoing of established structures and using the language of art to suggest new possibilities.